Sarah Caldwell learned this the moment she stepped off the supply wagon at the Blackwood Ranch, 30 miles from the nearest town that bothered with a name. 23 years old, widowed 6 months, with calloused hands and eyes that had already seen too much. The foreman who hired her in Santa Fe hadn't mentioned why 5 housekeepers had quit in 4 months. Hadn't mentioned the reputation of Clayton Blackwood, cattle baron, former Confederate major, a man whose wealth stretched across 10,000 acres of unforgiving desert, built on the broken backs of vaqueros who whispered his name like a curse. But Sarah needed the job. Needed it more than pride, more than safety, more than the warnings from the cantina women who crossed themselves when they spoke of Blackwood Ranch. The house rose from the desert like a mission built by a man trying to bargain with a god he'd stopped believing in. Whitewashed adobe walls, hand-carved timber beams shipped from Colorado, windows of actual glass that caught the gunmetal light of late afternoon and turned it into something almost holy. Beyond it, the land rolled away in waves of sage and rabbit brush, punctuated by twisted juniper trees that looked like they were trying to claw their way out of the earth. Clayton Blackwood waited on the veranda, and Sarah understood immediately why women fled. Not because he was cruel in his features, though the scar running from temple to jaw suggested violence lived close to him. Not because his eyes were cold, though they assessed her with the same dispassion he might give a horse at auction. But because everything about him radiated a darkness that had nothing to do with the shadow cast by the overhang above him. This was a man who'd made peace with his own damnation and decided to furnish it well. "You're the widow Caldwell." His voice carried the refined edges of Virginia aristocracy, scraped raw by whiskey and desert wind. "I'm Sarah Caldwell. The widow part ain't relevant to keeping house." Something flickered in those slate-gray eyes. Not quite amusement, maybe respect. "My expectations are exacting, Mrs. Caldwell. I require supper at 6 precisely. My office is not to be entered. The east wing remains locked. You will ask no questions about my business or my guests. In exchange, you will be paid triple the standard wage, receive room and board, and be left to your work unmolested. Do we have an understanding?" Sarah met his gaze without flinching. She'd stared down Comanche raiders during the crossing of the Cimarron. She'd held her husband's hand while cholera took him in 3 agonizing days. Clayton Blackwood, for all his wealth and darkness, was still just a man. "We do. Long as you understand, I don't abide cruelty to anyone under this roof, regardless of their station. Your vaqueros, your horses, your guests, they get treated with basic human decency, or you can find yourself another housekeeper." For 3 heartbeats, the desert held its breath. Then Clayton Blackwood smiled, a dangerous thing, like watching a wolf bare its teeth before it decides whether to attack or walk away. "You'll do, Mrs. Caldwell. You'll do just fine." 2 weeks passed before Sarah found the letters. She hadn't meant to pry. The evening wind had torn through the house with unusual fury, slamming open the door to Clayton's office despite the latch. When she went to secure it, papers had scattered across the Navajo rugs like autumn leaves. And there, among the bills of sale and property deeds, she found them. Dozens of letters, written in a careful, educated hand. Letters from former slaves. Men and women Clayton Blackwood had secretly purchased from other ranchers and employed at triple wages, sending them north to Colorado and California with stakes large enough to start new lives. Receipts for a school he'd anonymously funded in Santa Fe, specifically for Black and Mexican children. Correspondence with a judge in Denver about reforming territorial labor laws. The cruel cattle baron was running an underground railroad through New Mexico territory. "I would appreciate if you'd put those back, Mrs. Caldwell." Sarah's heart lurched. Clayton stood in the doorway, still in his riding clothes, dust coating him like a second skin. But his hand wasn't on his gun. His eyes weren't cold anymore. They were afraid. "You're going to get yourself killed," she whispered. "The ranchers in this territory, the former Confederates, if they knew..." Then I trust you'll keep this to yourself. His voice was carefully neutral, but she heard the edge underneath. The question. The vulnerability of a man who'd built his entire life around a secret that could cost him everything. Sarah carefully gathered the papers, returning them to his desk with reverent precision. When she looked up at him, something had shifted in the air between them, the way pressure changes before a summer storm. "My husband fought for the Union," she said quietly. "Died believing he'd made a difference, even though he never fired a shot. Just got sick on the march through Arkansas. I came west because there was nothing left for me back in Ohio except memories. But this," she gestured to the letters, "this is what he died for. What they all died for." Clayton's throat worked. "I was a Confederate major, led men into battles I didn't believe in, for a cause that shamed me. When the war ended, I had money, land, and a debt I could never repay. This is my penance, Mrs. Caldwell, not redemption, just penance." "Maybe," Sarah said, and something warm bloomed in her chest, dangerous, terrifying, real. "Or maybe it's both." The attack came on a Thursday, just after sunset painted the desert the color of old blood. 6 riders from the neighboring Kellerman spread, led by Silas Kellerman himself, a bull-necked former colonel who'd never accepted surrender. They'd gotten wind of Clayton's activities through a disgruntled vaquero, and they came with rope, with torches, with the kind of righteous fury that makes men into monsters. Sarah was in the kitchen when she heard the gunshot shatter the evening calm. Clayton kept Winchesters hidden throughout the house. She'd discovered them during cleaning, never questioning why a man might need such preparation. Now her hands moved with purpose, born of necessity, grabbing the rifle from beneath the sink cabinet, checking the load with efficiency her father had taught her back when wolves still threatened Ohio farmsteads. Through the window she could see Clayton in the courtyard, standing alone against 6 mounted men. His revolver was drawn but pointed at the ground, a deliberate show that he wouldn't fire first. The vaqueros had scattered to the bunkhouse, following his previous orders. Whatever came, he'd face it alone rather than risk their lives. Noble. Stupid. Exactly what she'd expected from a man trying to atone for ghosts. "You're harboring runaways, Blackwood!" Kellerman's voice carried across the courtyard like thunder. "Paying coloreds like they're white men, teaching them to read. You're a traitor to your own kind." "My kind," Clayton said, voice deadly calm, "are men with consciences. I know that's unfamiliar territory for you, Silas." The rifle crack split the air, warning shot, kicking up dust near Clayton's boots. Sarah didn't think, didn't calculate, just moved. She stepped onto the veranda with the Winchester raised, sighting down the barrel at Kellerman himself. The metallic click of her cocking the lever echoed across the courtyard like a church bell. "Next man fires shoots me first," she called out, voice steady despite her hammering heart, "because that's the only way you're touching him." 7 pairs of eyes swung toward her. Clayton's face went pale. "Sarah, get back inside." No, she didn't lower the rifle. "You want to string up a man for having a conscience? For paying honest wages and treating people like human beings? Then you'll have to go through me first. And I promise you, gentlemen, I don't miss." Kellerman's horse danced sideways, sensing his rider's tension. "This ain't your fight, woman." "The hell it ain't." Sarah descended the steps slowly, deliberately. "My husband died in the war. Died believing this country could be better than what it was, and I'll be damned if I let men like you prove him wrong." The standoff held for an eternity compressed into seconds. Then, from the shadows beyond the courtyard, figures emerged. The vaqueros, 24 strong, armed with rifles and shotguns and the kind of loyalty that money can't buy, but dignity earns. At their head was Miguel Reyes, Clayton's foreman, a man who'd been born into slavery in Texas and freed by Clayton 3 years prior. Patron Blackwood is under our protection, Miguel said quietly. You ride away now, or you don't ride away at all. Kellerman looked at the odds, 7 against 26, and his fury collided with pragmatism. His hand twitched toward his gun, but his horse backed up instead, responding to some unconscious signal. This ain't over, Blackwood. Yes, Clayton said, and for the first time Sarah heard iron in his voice, not cruelty, but strength. It is. The war ended 5 years ago, Silas. Time you figured that out. They rode into the gathering darkness, taking their hate with them but leaving the threat hanging in the air like cordite smoke. Clayton found Sarah on the veranda an hour later, still holding the Winchester, staring at the stars emerging like pinpricks in velvet. You could have been killed. He didn't sound angry. He sounded wrecked. So could you. She finally set the rifle down. But I wasn't about to let that happen. He moved beside her, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from him, smell the leather and sage and something uniquely him. When he spoke, his voice was raw. I don't deserve protection. Don't deserve loyalty. I led men to their deaths for a cause that makes me sick to remember. And now you're saving lives. Sarah turned to face him, and in the starlight, his scars looked like a map of everything he'd survived. You don't get to decide if it's enough, Clayton. You just keep doing it. Keep being better than what you were. His hand rose, hesitated, then carefully, so carefully, touched her cheek. And you, Sarah Caldwell? What are you running from out here in this desert? Not running, searching. She leaned into his touch, feeling something crack open in her chest, something that had been frozen since the day she buried her husband. For a reason to stay. For something worth building instead of just surviving. And have you found it? She smiled, and it was the first real smile she'd managed in months. I think maybe I have. When he kissed her, it tasted like redemption and new beginnings, like rain in the desert, rare and precious and life-giving. By 1875, the Blackwood Ranch had become a sanctuary and a staging ground. Over 300 souls passed through, heading north and west to freedom and opportunity. Sarah and Clayton married in a quiet ceremony, witnessed by vaqueros and former slaves, and anyone who'd ever benefited from a second chance. Together, they built something that changed the territory, not with violence or grand declarations, but with steady, dangerous compassion. A school, a clinic, a place where the desert's harshness was matched only by the fierce protection of those who'd found refuge there. The letters Sarah found that windswept evening are now preserved in the New Mexico State Archives, testament to one man's penance becoming his purpose, and one woman's courage rewriting both their stories. Sometimes the West wasn't won with guns. Sometimes it was won with conscience. Thanks for staying to the end. Where are you watching from? This story proves that even in the harshest landscapes, compassion can take root. Don't forget to subscribe for more untold Western tales of courage, redemption, and the people who changed history one quiet act of defiance at a time.